There are 2 games on Monday Night Football and $1 million up to first place on DraftKings. These are 13 players you want to play to win those dollar-rooskies. Starting with Vikings wide receiver at $5,300, Adam Thielen, who's coming off of a bad week, which is perfect for DFS and a cheaper price. Now, yes, it's true. Thielen saw just 4 targets last week, and it only resulted in 6.6 fantasy points. But guess what? The Vikings were hitting the easy button last week over and over again to Justin Jefferson. And can you blame them based on his 184-yard performance on 9 catches? The Packers at points had a linebacker on him, and you can be sure the Eagles are going to adjust, leaving one-on-ones for Thielen. And now he's going to be low owned at a favorable price point of $5,300. Play him and a guy who's pretty similar to him, and that would be the Eagles wide receiver Devonta Smith, who actually had 0 receptions on 4 targets last week. But let me ask you something. Remember this man, Christian Watson, last week, the Packers rookie who dropped a would-be 75-yard touchdown? Yeah, the man he beat was Patrick Peterson. And Peterson last week ranked 74th out of 91 cornerbacks in coverage, and his career has been going downhill for a couple of years now as an older player. And oh yeah, Devonta Smith is going to get to face him this week. And let me tell you something, Devonta catches that ball and scores a touchdown. Let's not forget how good of a player he is just because he had a bad week 1. He was a top 15 efficiency receiver last year, a former Heisman winner, and week 1 he was top 4 at getting open versus man coverage. He's going to get open versus Patrick Peterson. So expect lower ownership on Devonta, but then this next guy will definitely pick up some. And that's Stefon Diggs, who's $7,500 this week. Still a nice discount of $1,500 off of Justin Jefferson, and he'll have a good matchup versus Fulton in the Titans secondary. And Fulton last week in week 1 in man coverage gave up 4 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. And the only other matchup that Diggs is going to see is a rookie, Caleb Farley. This is a good spot for Diggs. And it's also a good spot for this RB. And that is going to be $8,000 Dalvin Cook, who between him and Derrick Henry for your pay-up options this week on DraftKings, he's going to be the one that I'm choosing here. And he had a pretty decent week 1 in terms of usage. He saw 23 touches and now will face the Eagles, who gave up the 5th most rushing yards last week to the Detroit Lions, over 180 rushing yards. Yeah, this is a good spot for Dalvin. So much so that I've taken his over 71.5 rushing yard prop, and you can as well, linked in the description below. And when you do, you'll get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you put in 50, you get 50 right back. You put in 20, you get 20. Put in 100, you have $200 to play with. Be sure to check it out. Take this prop and we'll give you some more throughout the video. The best running back value on the slate? There's not many, but it's going to be $5,500 Miles Sanders. But there's a big issue here. In week 1, he only saw 54% of the running back opportunities. 2 other running backs were involved in Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott. And then also there was Jalen Hurts running 10 plus times. And I have more bad news. Sanders only ran 12 routes week 1, leading to just 2 targets, and 4 different players scored a rushing touchdown for the Eagles. So this touchdown or bust player in Miles Sanders becomes a little bit more fluky. If you had to get a value running back, it would be him. But I do prefer the wide receivers on this slate, including this value. And that's Kyle Phillips, the Titans rookie wide receiver, 5th round rookie out of UCLA. He's just $3,600. And as you can see from my tweet here, in week 1, Kyle Phillips led this team with 6 catches, 9 targets, and 66 yards. He ran the 3rd most routes on the team. So here's what you need to know. Phillips dominated Titans camp in preseason, and he knows how to get open. And that's evident based on his 31% career college target share, which is top 7% of all time for any college receiver. So consider playing him as a value and this next receiver. And that's Gabe Davis in Buffalo, who actually ran more routes than Steph Diggs last week, and you get him at a nice price point of just $6,100. He's the only 6K receiver on the slate. Now, Davis will see those same beneficial matchups like we talked about earlier for Stefon Diggs. Now, here's how Davis played week 1. He ended up seeing a target on 15% of his routes run, which is really not that great, 69th amongst receivers, but the fact that he's in this good of an offense makes up for it. Because Davis was a top 15 fantasy receiver last week, 18.8 points, top 15 overall because of how good this offense is. So imagine if he actually plays well this week. Now let's talk about a quarterback. And there's really only 2 quarterbacks in play on this slate, in my opinion, and we can start with Jalen Hurts, who is a great discount off of Josh Allen, $700 discount off for a guy who I have pretty similar projected in my tools, which you can get on Patreon, linked in the description if you want ownership, projections, an optimizer, and a whole bunch more. Now, in week 1, Hurts was both top 10 in quarterback accuracy and also efficiency, yards per attempt, which helps when you have a guy like AJ Brown picking up a ton of yards after the catch. And then, of course, we know how good of a rusher he is. He had 17 carries last week for 90 yards and a touchdown, so he had 15 fantasy points alone on the ground. That's the type of upside and floor we're talking about here. Now, believe it or not, I actually like Hurts under passing yards, so I like him in fantasy, but it's because a lot of those mobile upside that he's going to be having. I like his under passing. I have him in the low 220s. You can take this prop again. You can pair it with the one earlier. You get that 100% deposit match. You put in 50, you get $50 Rooskies right there. And there you go. A couple props, and we got more for you in just a second. Now, speaking of A.J. Brown, he's at a nice price point of just $7,000, and he is coming off of a week, his Eagles debut, with 10+ targets, a 30+% target share. He looked fantastic. And he was doing what he does best. He was taking these quick passes, and he was picking up yards after the catch. Top 5 in yards after the catch after 1 week. This is good to see. But that's not all, because he also saw 37% of his snaps from the slot, which is 17% higher than his career average. And that's important because he has a massive advantage in the slot. Almost 35 pounds advantage over Chandler Sullivan in the slot, who was not good week 1, giving up a 75% catch rate. This is a great spot for A.J. Brown. And it's also a good spot for one of his teammates. And that would be Dallas Goedert, who's by far the best tight end play on the slate. He's also the most expensive, but he saw 4 targets week 1, and now check this out. He led all tight ends with 52 yards after the catch. He was the #1 efficiency tight end last year, and now he's doing it again to begin this year, and this was just on 4 targets. Imagine if he sees more. Because if he just scores 9 fantasy points like he did week 1, it might be enough on this slate. Because the rest of the tight ends on this slate aren't that enticing or appealing or have as much efficiency upside, at least in my opinion. Now, this next guy literally broke my database week 1, and that's Vikings wide receiver, the most expensive player on the slate at $9,000, Justin Jefferson. And the reason he broke the database was he saw a 75% air yard share, meaning the amount of yards in the air from when it left Kirk Cousins' hand to where the ball fell. He saw 75% of those, by far #1 in the NFL week 1, leading to 11 targets and nearly 40 fantasy points. It's tough to afford him. I prefer Dalvin Cook and maybe some of the cheaper receivers, but if you can, he's obviously a great play. And one way to afford him would be to go to a value tight end. I said I don't really like these guys, but if you wanted to just force it in and hope they find a touchdown, I would just go to the cheap one in Austin Hooper at $3,000. Now, he only played 62% of the snaps week 1, but when he was out there, he was running a route. He was second on the team with 20 routes run, and it led to a couple of targets. And the good news is there's no true #1 wide receiver in Tennessee. So expect around 20 routes and 2 to 4 targets. You're hoping for a touchdown here. And another value option for you at the running back position, $4,300 Zack Moss, who this was a surprise week 1. He saw over 50% of the opportunities and operated technically as the RB1 in Buffalo, seeing 12 total touches. And the most surprising part, he saw 6 targets, but this is not sustainable because he only ran 14 routes. Usually on 14 routes, you see 2 targets at the running back position. But the rookie James Cook fumbled early on last week and got benched, and he ended up playing well, Zack Moss. So don't expect insane efficiency, but this is encouraging usage. I honestly like him more for the cheaper price point than Devin Singletary, who only saw about 40% of the opportunities last week. And I don't think this is being accounted for. Prize Picks currently has Singletary projected out as like the true RB1 here, when we obviously know Josh Allen could run the ball. Zack Moss was the RB1 last week, so I'm taking the under 45.5 on Singletary. Be sure to click the link in the description to take advantage of your deposit match. Again, put in 20, you get 20 right back. You want to be a high roller, a heavy hitter, and put in 100, you get $100 Rooskies right back. You use the code SAL22. It's linked in the description. And now, last but certainly not least, Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a little bit tougher to get to, and I prefer paying up at running back and wide receiver, but last week he was fantastic. He was the quarterback 2 in the week, scoring over 33 fantasy points, and he led every quarterback in not just efficiency, a crazy 9.6 yards per attempt, but also accuracy, his true accuracy rating. This guy was elite. And now I currently have him projected for 25.5 fantasy points, which is about 2 more fantasy points than any other quarterback on the slate. So he is worth the price tag. It just matters what you can do with the rest of your lineup. Can you find 1 or 2 value options that make you get there? I prefer probably going a little bit cheaper, but he's a fantastic play this week. So these were the 13 best plays that you must start and must consider for Monday Night Football. If you want to see all of my tools, ownership, and lineup optimizer, projections, and more for this slate and all the daily fantasy slates, then click the link in the description to my Patreon. And we will be live right here on this channel on Monday night leading up until the game, so be sure to subscribe so you know when we're going live.